this. Will you pop up the screen so I remember what I'm talking about? Kind of dropped off and was like midpoint. I'm like,
Welcome, rest of the network. Sorry about that. We had a technical problem, and but we are now going, and I apologize. So we were already starting into our discussion and of the article for the week. And Anton, thanks for flexibility here. So here we go.
Okay, just quick overview. We covered, this article on how Chief Diversity Officer has become a new role on the scene, but there's lack of growth there. We've only grown 5% in the last 3 years in an area that's much needed. And the problem with it has been that there's just short tenure, high turnover, minimal experience among CDOs. The turnover is super high, but there's also very little support. Nearly 60% leave for other roles. Here's the important fact. With the majority leaving the CDO path entirely. That's the stat that I couldn't remember earlier that was really shocking to me. When you want the answer for why the number is not growing, when 60% leave for other roles and majority of them not coming back to CDO completely, there's a red flag going on. What is going on? We have to quickly investigate this as HR teams, C-level teams, and figure out how to do that, because under 18% of current CDOs had prior experience in a role, down from 26% in 2018. That is not a trend we want to continue. Anything to add on this, Kev?
Yeah, it's interesting that what, to me, having folks leaving a role that much indicates that we're not, like you've talked about, we're not respecting the position. They're not being used effectively. And because that's true of most any position, when we hire people and then really don't give value to what they offer, people just aren't going to hang around. And if that's a pattern across, that role in a lot of companies, we're going to even be less likely to go back into that in another place.
I don't know if you've ever had the experience personally of having to create a role that never existed. I've been there, and it's hard if you don't have good support. I've had it in two different markets. So it was different experience where in one market I had all the support in the world. The leadership was there. It was really, integrated. We worked together to figure everything out. The other market was like, well, you kind of have an idea what to do, so just make it happen for us. And I'm like, I can't do that. Like, there's not a defined process that exists. Yes, I have a little bit of a process from before, but that was in a completely different environment, completely different situation with completely different people. I need the leadership team to be around me and giving me ideas, giving me feedback as that kind of individual. Let's get into the presentation, guys. Today we're talking about working from home, right? That's kind of the main focus, and discussing some issues that may be coming from working from home, right? Kevin wrote a great article on this in 2020. I took some of the just, high level points that he took there and threw them on a slide so we can just kind of talk about them. But some of them are very common and we understand, right? I think the one that I started with is the one that most companies look at. Working from home impact on productivity. Positive, negative, I don't know. Let's talk about it a little bit. What's your thoughts, Kev?
Oh, wow. This is a big one because it indicates a lot of things. One is the people that land on the side of working from home is unproductive and is ineffective are typically people that do not lead, but they manage people. And the only way that they can feel confident in doing things is to have people around them so they can be, if you will, watching over their shoulder all the time. So how people land on this issue becomes very important. There's a lot of studies that indicate that some people, and we have to understand, work from home is not for everybody, and the effect on productivity is not going to be one size fits all. But there are a lot of people that are showing that they actually are much more productive when they're working from home for whatever reasons. There's a number of them. So yeah, productivity is a big debate right now. And there is one of the things that I've noticed, and even in some of my own family, is as this discussion goes on and the debate whether to work from home or not, a part of this is about trust. And that's a tough one that we've got to figure out if we're going to trust each other, and a leader to a team member or boss to employee, however you want to look at it. Are we going to work off of trust?
I love that you coupled the word trust with work productivity. Real quick, shout out to Ricky Hardy. He's a regular of ours. He got married yesterday on his parents' anniversary. That's awesome,
wow.
Ricky. Congrats, man.
Thank you, Ricky.
That's great news. I hope it's a beautiful day and you're going to be enjoying your honeymoon if that's what you do. So trust and productivity. What's interesting to me is you said it's not going to be a one size fits all. What I'm about to say can apply to a company, it can apply to a team, it can apply to a relationship. The scale can move across. The productivity is going to matter or going to be impacted positively or negatively depending on how things were done prior to shift to working from home, right? So if you're going from a place of low trust, an environment that is very micromanagey, that doesn't have great culture, chances are when that person shifts from working from home, their productivity is going to go down. That's my perspective. And here's why. They don't care about your company. They're going to keep doing the bare minimum to just get by. And because you don't have the oversight, productivity is going to go down. It's not the problem of working from home, though. The problem was that you had no trust. You have no culture. Your team members can't stand you as a leader, or they don't like your organization, your vision, your mission, whatever it may be. It's not working from home that created the productivity. The productivity issue existed. It just become magnified when people move to work from home. Now, on the other hand, you may have a trust culture, right? And people love you as a leader. They love the company, love the vision, the mission. They love everything that they do there. And you put them working from home, and all of a sudden you remove some barriers that were actually holding them back. They had to deal with juggling kids and life and their schedules, and now you allowed them to manage their schedules much better. Or a simple standpoint, right? We all have this, something for you to think about. Do you have a certain part in the day when you are better at doing certain things versus others, right? Are you, for me, analytics in the morning, all day, every day. Creativity in the afternoon, all day, every day. I fit a general profile. By the way, folks, that's what our brain does. We're more analytical in the morning when our cortisol is up, and which is our stress response hormone, get our energy going, get us going for the day. And we're more creative in the afternoon when that stress response down, and we're more calm, and our view opens up. We're not so kind of boxed in. But just a different thought on it, right? So just don't blame the work from home shift on productivity. Continue to blame your culture or lack thereof as part of the problem, and this just become magnified. So what people do about it, Kev? What I want to, I don't just want to create focus around it, but in your opinion, what can people do to make sure that they stay productive at home?
Oh, wow. A lot of factors. One is planning. I know as I have shifted from time to time out of home work to in-home work, planning schedules around family, making sure that routines that had been in one way are going to be okay under new circumstances. I do really suggest if you're going to be doing work from home regularly, having an office or a set aside location just for that, so that you can isolate from other activities around the home. And then you have to set some limits, again, when you're working, to be about working. I think another factor that is talked about is the area of dressing for work. I know it sounds crazy, but when we go into our home office and we're still in our PJs or whatever, it's hard to have a mindset related to work at that point. So at a minimum, get up and dress as if you were going to work, and then your mindset will be there related to that. So there are a number of factors. What you shared about differing times of the day. It may be that, for example, if you're working with a company or organization in a different time zone, you may have to shift your work times to evening. I know some people that actually do their primary work overnight for them, which is a daytime for their client or whatever. So just got to keep those things in mind. And I think the other piece is we've got to be sure and look at how we measure productivity. There are the challenge is current way we measure productivity is strictly off of a checkbox version KPI, and that is not. I don't whether you're in office or not is not a good way to measure performance. There are a lot more factors, and the sooner we get a better performance measure, the more accurate we're going to know if working from home is productive or not. And just as a caveat, there are some people that are not going to be as productive working from home, and having a way to provide them opportunity to work back at the office and take into account the differences is another factor.
So I have severe ADHD, like bad squirrel syndrome, whatever, shiny object syndrome.
Shiny thing disorder.
Yeah, that's what we call it. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, working from home has made it harder to manage my ADHD, because I feel like there's just so many different things that switch off versus work tasks. Yes, that's one thing. But now I have life tasks, kids, this, that, and it's become really challenging. So I like what you said there. That's really helps me is recreate the work environment as much as you can at home, minus the negatives, right? Minus the restrictions and whatever it is. I have an office. It's completely closed off. It's not like in my bedroom. It's separate in my house. I like your point on getting ready. That's something that I didn't do enough in the beginning part of the pandemic, because I was like, why bother? And I noticed like motivation's down. I'm just not as productive as I was. And then I started showering when I get up versus waiting till later in the day. I started, getting dressed and doing all those things. And it mattered. It did absolutely matter. And it got my mind ready for work. The other thing I would say is just watch your schedules. Like we tend to overdo too much because we have the freedom, and then we burn ourselves out, and now we're kind of done for the rest of the day. Set up breaks, just like you would in a normal environment, different things that you can do at work. We have different tasks. We break up our day. Sometimes we have meetings. Break up your day with different tasks, just the same way as you would with work, to make sure that doesn't happen. Let's go to the next one.
Welcome, Hassam from Egypt. Glad to have you with us.
That's not a common one we get. Welcome from Egypt. I love that. Love it. Love it. So next one is dealing with isolation, right? That's another one that is common. For some of us introverts like me, I have no problem here. I'm like, hey, this is great. Like, I'm not gonna talk to nobody. Nobody's bothering me. Like, I just get to focus on me. But even an introvert like myself still needs interaction. As much as I tell myself I'm better off because I'm not putting myself in uncomfortable situations, I'm not. That's the reality. When I pull away into that 30,000-foot view and I look at what does human interaction do for me as an introvert, it's a positive. It always is a positive. It's not something I want to do, but the minute I engage, so for me, it's usually hard to initiate conversation. Once the conversation started, I'm usually pretty good, as long as it's not small talk, to maintain and to keep going. But that's me. I'm an introvert. What about people that are fueled by interaction, that need it for energy, that need it to, grow and enjoy life? Like, I can't imagine how much those folks are impacted.
Well, it's funny. A couple of different scenarios that I observed is I know people in my own family that comment that they're introverts, and they really are, or the other term is loners, and they're happy just by themselves. Yet these same people at different times complain about being lonely. And I go, no, wait a minute. You can't have it both ways. And I think it just goes to the point that even people that are introverted do need that social interaction. It's a matter of degrees. None of us can function in a healthy fashion in pure isolation all the time. And interesting thing about this is that we probably will not see some of the effects of this initially, because everybody gets so used to the newness, the romantic period. But you get into this 2, 3, 4 months down the road, and all of a sudden you're starting to feel left out. You're disconnected, number of different responses. And by that time, if you've made a hard commitment to working from home, it's going to be difficult to undo. So as we go into this, it's just another element we really got to consider.
And I really like your point on things not materializing right away. When we discuss human beings, it's not a flip of a switch. Our change is very gradual. It's like a slow drip out of an IV until that IV is gone, or whatever happens. And the change, because of that, is subtle.
Yeah.
And due to the subtlety of change, we don't notice it as much. And I keep trying to reiterate this point. One of the biggest reasons why we're not doing more as a society about stress is because we don't know what good feels like anymore. We've forgotten what these amazing experiences are that we should be having daily, and we've gotten accustomed to subpar experience. So how are we supposed to fight for something if we don't know what it's worth anymore, right? And that's what I see with when you're saying things are going to come on later on. We're going to go and do these things. We're going to fix the problems that we've had from working from home too much, from isolation, from all these things that we've had over the last year. The issue is that, are we going to fix them while they're easy to fix and it's a 3 to 6 months correction? Or are we going to fix them when the doctor's giving us a pill and saying, you can't exercise for a year and a half because that's too much for your body. That is too much of a big stressor. You can't get excited because your body can't handle it. Those are the two choices. Guys, there's not going to be in the middle. Like human beings, it's a pattern. Like if you see a human being pattern, it's going to just grow and repeat unless somebody puts a stop to it and changes something. And our pattern right now is not a good one. Let's get into the next one.
Let's see here. Let's see. Hassam has a comment here. I want to share that. It says, this is a very important point to discuss, working from home, but you're talking about the management, about management work, which anyone can do it from home. But when it comes to body work, how can that be? Yeah, it's a challenge. Dealing with the physical presence and dealing with those issues. And that's part of what we are going to be discussing. And it has to be considered as part of the plan for working from home. Because
I'm going to touch on nutrition and movement in the next couple slides here. We'll dive into that in like 10 minutes, Hassam.
Yep. Okay.
But yeah, and this is kind of starting to get into the chemical side of things, right? And it's a great point that you brought up. When we consider working from home, we consider the work side of it, right? We consider the tasks that we do, the things that we execute, whatever it may be, goals, KPIs, but we don't consider how we are while we're working from home. We're considering what we're doing, why we're doing all those things, but we're not considering how we are while we're doing it. And Kevin had struggles with his computer today, right? All the right prep work went into it. All the right things went to make sure that this show was set up how it was supposed to be set up. That's the part that we've covered so far. But the operating system didn't show up that day, right? The computer operating system decided to do something else. Well, the same thing goes for the human operating system. You can do all the right things to set up your day, set up your environment, set up your tasks. But this thing on your head is not functioning. This thing around your body is not feeling good. Guess what? All those things going to break down because ultimately everything flows through you. And that's the point that we drive so hard to Perspective Force through our Human SOS movement, is that companies have overinvested into everything else except the thing that pushes the buttons, signs the paper, talks to the customer, and there is underinvestment in that. But that's the greatest thing that's struggling. So on this one, chemical challenges from being home, right? It's something that
Hassam has a follow-up comment that follows just what you were talking about. And basically, we've got to consider the human element. That is such a critical piece that and so much of business decision, we forget we're not robots, we're not computers.
And Hassan, that's what our company's built on. That's literally the foundation. Anything
Mhm.
that we do is sourcing from that. Human beings are suffering at work, at home, in their life from just a human performance standpoint, inside out. It's both mental and chemical. And we have to find how, as leaders and just in ourselves taking ownership of our own problems, how we approach it from both standpoints. How do we solve the chemical problem? We're working on the mindset, right? At the same time, and come in the middle and create that perfect thing. So that's what we're kind of talking about, chemical challenges from working from home. One of the things that happens when we work from home is our neurotransmitters are impacted negatively, right? You need a little bit, just like perfect example, when Kevin talked about getting ready for the day. When you're getting ready for the day, you're actually positively impacting your brain chemicals. Your body's getting ready to create that function and stuff like that. But when you're constantly just sitting, you're in this, not getting sunlight, even getting outside and getting some sun, that all matters. Interacting with people, like we already talked about, that all matters. Those are all things that create chemicals in our body that produce feelings of wanting to do work, produce feelings of feeling that this company is good, produce feelings of like what I'm doing matters, right? It's not just what you do as a leader that makes your people feel that way. It's not just what you say to them. It's not just what the company does, because all those things can be fine. But if this thing has the wrong chemicals in it and they're imbalanced, my boss can be amazing, but I'm going to not trust them. I'm going to, undermine everything that they do. And I'm going to look everything through a negative lens. It's not because of my boss, not because of my company. It's because my chemicals are interpreting everything that way. So make sure you're getting outside. That's one of the biggest things that I say when you're working from home. Get outside at least twice a day. Yes, I'm saying twice a day, not just one short little 5-minute walk. Make it to where you set up breaks. You can do phone calls by walking outside. You can do so many things that keep you active, but more importantly, experiencing nature. It is vital to your brain.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that to think about. A lot of modern offices are designed with sunlight. That's it. So you come home and you're in an office, some even without a window or anything.
Mm-hmm.
The impact on us chemically and therefore mentally becomes pretty remarkable. So yeah, something that has to be considered.
The other thing I see from it, and then I don't have sleep on there, but because people have so much freedom of schedule a lot of times, their sleep cycles become inconsistent, right? Normally we know I got to get up at 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, whatever is your get up time, because I know that I got to start my morning routine to get to a certain place at a certain time. When that is not there, people can stay up later into the night, and then they just give themselves a lot more flexibility with their sleep cycle. And you don't want to do that. Too much inconsistency confuses your body. It doesn't know when to go to bed. It doesn't know when to wake up. We're supposed to go to bed when the sun goes down, wake up when the sun comes up. That's not modern life anymore because we don't live outside, right? So now we need to set that circadian rhythm, which is our body's pattern for energy and stuff like that, when it should be awake and should be asleep, but consistently going to bed and waking up within obviously some parameters. But that's something that freedom of schedule gives to us. And it's not always a positive.
We're not always our best friend.
No, not always. Let's go to the next one. So strained emotional intelligence, right? And this one is not necessarily a direct thing. It's an outcome of many other things, right? And an example, right? I'm home all the time. My kids are home from school all the time. So they're constantly, Dad, I need this. Dad, I need this. Dad, I need that. Dad, let's go have fun. I'm on summer break. And I'm 6 weeks away from finishing my MBA, taking 2 other certifications and trying to build a company at the same time. Like, I don't have time for that. And I get frustrated. I'm like, why can't you understand how busy I am? My 9-year-old's going to understand how busy I am. No, she's not. But that's just a sign of like emotional intelligence going downhill, whether it be from extra stress, whether it be from my environment, whether it be from whatever. All of those things actually start to go downhill. Also, lack of practice. Emotional intelligence, just like many things in our body, it's not a flip-on switch and now I got it. It's a sliding scale that's constantly moving based on your environment. So if you don't have practice of putting yourself into those kind of environments, your emotional intelligence starts to go down simply from that isolation we just talked about. You're not doing enough of those reps to get things right.
Yeah, it's being emotionally intelligent takes practice. It's not a purely learned and done thing. It is something we have to practice, and the value of being in an office among other people is we get to practice In fact, trial by fire at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you can see next one is freedom, right? And then there's some problem with that to where there can be too much freedom, right? And one of those things we just talked about was sleep. But some people, you need to know your people. It's something that we talk
Mm-hmm.
about all the time and understanding who is what, some people may need a little bit more check-ins. Because I am at my point in my life where I feel like I could be self-motivated, but there's also times where I need a little bit of check-in. I need a little bit of, pulse on my carotid arteries, feeling how I'm doing. I respond well to pressure, and I want my leaders to put a little bit of pressure on me in the right way. And if they give me complete freedom, don't check in until just see my outcomes, I don't do that well. I am not one kind of person that complete autonomy is going to be perfect. On the other hand, I'm also not the kind of person that if you tell me everything to do and all I have to do is just do the task, I'm not motivated. Like that's not a good thing. So I need that balance of some freedom versus, no freedom at all. But people are different. People respond to this completely differently.
Yeah. Key is knowing your folks. And, we think, and I appreciate the value of freedom, and I would never underestimate that. But freedom in the sense of always having opportunity to do only what we want to do is not healthy for any of us. Now, it's a matter of degrees. Some of us can move forward and get things done and overcome those distractions and obstacles. Other people will suffer remarkably without that structure. They need that. I watch it in children, young people, in learning environments. Some of them, you give them an assignment and get out of their way. Others, you got to be, okay, so you've done this. Okay, let's move into this. And knowing your people, but don't assume, just like we do in the office, that one size is going to fit everybody. Whether it's in the office or home, we have to take these things into consideration.
And this is where leaders have to be coaches. And this is not leaders have to be coaches, not just because of this. There's a million reasons we can list and we always talk about it. But, sometimes people don't even know what's best for them. And I know that's not like a great thing to say. Like you're like, oh, you're supposed to let people lead their way and do all that. But if they don't have experience with freedom or they're not very self-aware, I'm not telling you to tell them what to do. I'm saying as a coach, you need to help them explore what's best for them, right? And help them really understand, I think I want all the freedom in the world, right? That's what I think in my head. But when I actually get it, there's two things that can happen, right? I can pay attention to the outcomes, or I could still keep telling myself everything's great and just believing that the outcomes are great. There needs to be data. I still believe in data. Data drives the world. So as a leader, it doesn't have to be subjective data or objective data. It could be subjective data too. But talk to them and see how, now that you've given them that freedom of working from home, how does it feel? What areas do you feel have improved? What areas do you feel have gotten worse? Let's work through that. How can we emphasize the ones that improve and make them even better? And the ones that got worse, what can we do there? But how many leaders sit and have this conversation in a one-on-one? How are you feeling about freedom today? I'm being facetious, but that's the reality. It seems silly, but you should be talking about that, right? That those are conversations that should be occurring.
Well, and there are times, and I know this is true of me, and I believe it's true of most anyone, and I don't mean to be very blunt, but I've got to be blunt. There are times where the best thing we can do for someone is to give them a swift kick in the behind and say, man, get on with it. And that is almost contradictory to the concept of freedom. But the idea is not that you're going to always be doing that, but just when it's needed. So, yeah, there has to be a balance between freedom and accountability. I think that's the balance to that is the degree of accountability.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like people are afraid of freedom. People are afraid to give their employees freedom. And I'm like, don't. Like people, if you have to believe that people are good on the inside, you have to believe as a leader that most likely if things are going bad, you're in the way or you're not doing something right. And don't try to control it. Don't try to micromanagement. You'll be amazed sometimes what people will do when you just step out of the way and help. But at the same time, check in, make sure that they're getting what they need. They have the accountability, like Kevin said, and go from there. I think there's one more.
Yeah,
There's two
Hassan
more.
makes a comment that, let me just go ahead and flash this up, that sometimes things change that we don't anticipate, and that we have to address those things, such as the current situation around COVID and those discussions. We need to have those conversations and know our people in regards to it, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, Hassan, there's one word that comes to mind when I read your statement, and ultimately one word that comes to mind after the last year and a half, and that word is recovery. Right? We need to recover the human race from the load we have put on top of the human race's shoulders. That load is not new. COVID-19 didn't break us, right? COVID-19 added to an already existing problem that has been going on. We've been living in a stress epidemic ever since the dot-com age. The dot-com age has increased expectations, demand, and all sorts of stuff because of technology. Technology grows exponentially, not linearly. And that's a big thing to understand. But our brain, our body does not grow exponentially. Our brain, our body grows at a very slow, linear way, right? So that's the disconnect. So we've added all this stuff on people's shoulders, and we're asking, what do we do? What do we do? How do we fix it? Simplify it. We have to understand it from a very macro standpoint. We have to offload the load just for a little bit, right? It's not about taking it off and going on vacation. That's not what I'm saying. Giving the body enough recovery to get back to normal. We talk about this, we haven't in a while, but we talk about a bucket capacity, right? Your body is a bucket, and it can hold a certain amount of stress in it depending on the size of the bucket. Some people's buckets are big, some people's buckets are small, and that's why some people are much more resilient than others. The water represents the stress. When that water is in the bucket and it's not overflowing, that's fine. That's normal. We can take stress on. It's not a bad thing. But when that water is not being controlled, we're not offloading and recovering, that water starts to overspill, right? So we had issues. We had problems as it is. Then you put COVID on everybody's shoulders, and that water didn't just become to overflow a little bit. It started spilling over everywhere. And people's buckets start to filling up other buckets around them because it's splashing everywhere and it's going, and people can't control their stress. So fundamentally, we have to get back to the idea recovering the human race to give us a break, right?
Welcome, Adnan. Glad to have you with us today. Yeah, the topic of freedom, I always think of it in terms of the freedom versus license, okay? Freedom is the opportunity to make good choices, but it includes a level of responsibility. License means I can do whatever I want, when I want, regardless of what happens. And we've got to make sure that we don't give license, but that we come with real freedom, which includes responsibility. And by the way, one of the things that's come up for me around the whole issue of work from home is that we've already got 2 strikes against us in the workforce that have been around for a time and are impacting negatively, and that's our education system and our generational differences. My concern is, depending on how we address this work from home question, this could be a final straw to create a tremendous workforce crisis. And part of it's going to be what you just talked about. The stress level is going to really impact in terms of what an employee is and who is even willing to be employed versus everybody going out and doing their own thing. I think that large companies potentially are going to be disrupted, not directly because of bottom line issues, but because of workforce issues. So
I like what you said, workforce crisis. That's we're headed. We are so headed there. And some of the things you mentioned are huge, but there's also other huge things. And, it's all going to hit a wall, and we're going to be dealing with it, and it's going to be too late. And that's the same thing. It's going to be a year and a half, 2 years for companies to fix and correct the problem versus 3 to 6 months of taking care of it right now. If you're in that position, you think you're heading that way, reach out. Let's talk about it. Let's help you fix it. Hit the next slide. So we got 2 more, right? And then we're getting more into the practical side, things that you hear about stress management usually, but poor nourishment. Being able to be 20 feet from your fridge at all times from your snack cupboard is not a good thing, guys. Like it's just very simple. I'm not going to get super scientific on you guys here. Availability of poor choices at your fingertips while having the freedom of getting up whenever you want, doing whatever you want, and maybe even additional boredom because of lack of interaction with people will cause you to boredom eat, will cause you to just snack and do those kind of things. And what does that do? It throws your chemicals off, throws your body off, and then it makes you do more of that thing the next day. So when you eat crappy, notice that if you eat crappy one day, you're more likely to eat crappy the next day, not just because of a mental thing. It's actually a physiological thing as well that's driving that, because your blood sugar regulation and insulin sensitivity is off. So the bottom line, fridge is there, you start that pattern, and then it's really hard to get out of it. So be careful and consider, what can I do to make sure this happens? Set some rules. You know, if you have to put a lock on your fridge, trust me, I've done that with clients. You're joking, I've done it to where the spouse knew the lock and that's all that there was. The person couldn't get to a cupboard, same thing. But I think that's a little extreme. Minimize the amount of bad choices in your household. And if you do give yourself permission for something, buy something small so it doesn't stay around. Right. So if you buy a big bag of something and you only had a little bit, well, guess what? The next few days you're munching and then you're going to have issues. I'm not saying to eat perfectly. That's not what we believe in. What we believe in is eating in the right balance of good and bad, which is 80% good, 20% not. But if it's always available, you're making it much harder on yourself to do so.
Well, and what's interesting is that I don't know that people are considering that in the area of nutrition, if you are already making poor nutritional decisions at home and you come to work at home, then the potential is that you're going to go to a situation where you are, those issues become exacerbated, because sometimes in your office environment, I know it can go either way, but sometimes you're getting positively influenced by people in your office that say, hey, you know, let's don't go get food that's bad for us. Let's go find something that's a little more healthy. And so work from home can isolate you from bad influences, but it can also isolate you from good influences.
No, absolutely. And that's see, it's all the unconnected things that we don't see. A lot of times when CEOs, executives sit down and they evaluate these situations, you just can't see all the little ripple effects of certain decisions, right? It's like you mentioned, the influence. That influence plays a role in everything that we do. Having be around people, right? The Bernie Log principle. Like if you're around people that are motivated, that are better, you're going to become like that. If you're not around those kind of people, or you're around people that are maybe lazy or whatever, you're going to become like that. So that influence is a great point. Let's hit the last one, and that's movement. So that's the one that's not, you know, it's also being hindered. Lack of movement or also improper movement. So we're more sedentary at home than we go to work. That's just fact. Like if I've seen it on clients that wear these, you know, trackers on their wrists, and activity levels are significantly different. Just think about it. Like I got to go ask somebody a question. Usually I'm going to just get up, run over to their office, ask them a question. Now I got to ask somebody a question. I'm going to stay in my seat. I'm going to get on Zoom call, or I'm going to shoot an email, and that's all I need. Right? The opportunity for movement has drastically reduced, which means your focus for additional movement needs to increase. But also look at ergonomics. A lot of offices are set up a certain way. If you have a good company, and not all bad companies don't focus on ergonomics, but I'm just saying they should focus on ergonomics. How your office is set up, your chairs, your desk, your computer height, all those things matter. Right? Even like your keyboards and things like that. If you're starting to get carpal tunnel from typing too much because of improper placement. But the bottom line is, usually at home, we don't have that. Nobody's going to come in and think about how ergonomically efficient is your office. That's something that you need to do. You need to consider, how have I set this up? And this is where companies need to consider this. You need to give your people a stipend. You need to give your people a stipend to set up their office the way that it needs to be. I promise you, the money spent on that computer, that office chair, that desk, you know, whatever is needed, is going to be paid back well over the expenses. It's going to be an investment because their productivity and many other things are going to be improved.
Thought it was interesting. We were having this discussion on my Wisdom Seeker Live podcast yesterday. And apparently in some countries, this particular citation was Australia, that if your home office is not set up properly and you have an injury of some kind related to work, then you are left unprotected because the protections offered under the assumption that your office is safe, ergonomically correct, and those things. So again, in some countries, your home office becomes an even greater issue than what would be in other places. And that's not something that I think we've even addressed in the U.S. How would that factor in? If we get hurt in our home office, somehow is that going to qualify for a workers' compensation?
What a thought, man. Like that is just another level, right? That's that deeper level that we won't see until we've been in it for some time, or until we've had the problems come in that set the precedent that allow us to pivot. But I'm going to challenge people, think what Kevin talked about just now and see how can we pivot now to make sure that we don't face those problems. Your workman's comp going through the roof, your lawsuits and all those things starting to happen will be a lot more expensive than being proactive with it right now and saying, what do we do to prevent this? Because this is something that I'm really wondering about, right? The extension of the office space. What's going to happen when the office space has extended into your home, but you're not a W-2, but you were a W-2 employee? Right.
Yeah.
It's different when it's gig workers and things like that, like it's always been. But now W-2 employees are becoming very common to where you're a hybrid, right? You have a choice. You can work from home. You can work from work. How are we going to draw those lines? Are we going to draw lines? And if we're not going to draw lines, how are we going to make sure we're protecting people at home the way that they should be protected the same way at work? What a great point, dude. That's huge.
Well, there is just, I was involved in a post this morning on LinkedIn, and the key here is that organizations that include their people in part of this conversation, rather than making a C-suite office decision on this, are going to have the best chance to survive. And having conversations in around not just intended consequences, but unintended consequences. That's what's most of the time. It's not the intended consequences that destroy decisions. It is the unintended. And I would encourage, if you haven't, to read the article. I posted a link to the article because I co-wrote this with Tisha Nyhorster, and we did a pretty thorough look into many aspects of this. And I'm not sure that we have exhausted that, but it's certainly a good place to start and have these conversations and consider the implications, both pro and con, as we move this forward. And hopefully we will avoid having to do major recovery efforts in months down the road.
And a simple solution for this: hire us to help you. I mean, the bottom line, like, let us come in and assess your situation. That's the biggest thing that we would do, right? Whether you're going to come in and hire us long term, or you just simply want us to come in and assess, and we can point to you what's going on, what areas need improvement, which one of our 12 principles is being most strained for each of your folks. And then we can give that information and move on, or we can now become and put our coaching hats on and say, okay, now let's change it. But let's change it in the way that your people want to change it, versus, like Kevin said, a C-level coming up with something and then just let's roll it out. We just need a lot of great change management to make it happen. No, you need a lot of people input to make it happen.
One of the values we bring, and it's not new to this situation, is our ability to do two things. One, come in and see the big picture, and then from the big picture, dig down and get beyond symptoms and find root, and help address the root causes and come up with that human consideration of how to change. We don't get in these situations instantly. It's to use our branding, 10% effect that occurs negatively. And we know well enough to know that it takes a 10% change positively to really start overcoming. So
Absolutely.
We're good at it. And I don't like bragging, but I guess what do they say? If it's true, it's not bragging. So
bread and butter, man. I mean, like, there's companies that do a lot of different things, but stress management is what we do. And it's not the the big picture of it, right? That's what I want people to understand. I'm trying really hard to break away from this traditional Eastern medicine kind of stress management approach. That's one tool. That's just one input, one way of doing things. There's dozens and dozens different types of ways to approach it. And there's many components that have to go into it. Eastern medicine will not fix organizational stress. It'll help, but it won't fix it.
I think you mean Western medicine, right?
No, I mean Eastern. I mean yoga, meditation, those kind of things.
Sorry, I misunderstood.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, right? And don't get me wrong, I love those things, guys. I'm a meditation coach. I've been teaching yoga for almost 10 years. Like I was taught to meditate by a Buddhist monk when I was 12. Like I live and breathe. My daughter meditates every morning with me. But I'm also going to say it's not a solution for everything. It just can't be, because when you understand the human body from the standpoint that I understand, you see that only helps certain factors. It's not going to help all the others. But why would we choose a tool that doesn't match the person's need? That's just good enough. That's not what we're about.
It's become the spiritual ping pong table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's funny, right? The culture. So the corporate solution for culture problems is to get a ping pong table and have lazy Fridays or whatever.
Yeah.
The corporate solution for stress problems these days, management's awful, but let's just get some meditation coaches in here and we're going to fix everything. Right. Come on, man. Like, get out of here. We got better tools, better things we can do. So let's really get down to business. That's all we got today, guys. Thank you so much. Like, you guys rock. I mean, you all rock. Ricky, I saw you hung out with us pretty much the whole time with your comments. I appreciate you, brother. I hope you have an amazing day and your beautiful wife.
Congratulations, Ricky. Good news to hear, and hope that your new situation, your marriage starts off with amazing blessings, endures for a lifetime. So thanks everyone for being here. Reach out to us. Let us be a part of your solutions, including considerations from work from home. And we look forward to seeing you next week, every Tuesday, 11 o'clock on either LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube. So thanks. Take care. Have a great week, everybody.
Bye, guys.